So if you're having a limnological emergency and you absolutely need to know what the water temperature profiles look like in a lake or pond, and you don't have the proper equipment to do it, you can hack one pretty well out of this kind of equipment. What you basically need is one of these wired thermometer things. These go for about I don't know, $5 to $12 or something. They're really quite cheap, but you need one that has a wire because wireless doesn't work underwater very well. You need some inexpensive cable. This is telephone cable. This is 100 feet of this. You'll need as much as a little bit more than the depth of whatever system you're working on. And you can see this is 4 conductor, but we really only need 2 conductors. You need some kind of a weight. I found this in my garage, so I'm using that. And you need a measuring tape and maybe some electrical tape. And if you're really extremely keen, you can and you know how to run a soldering gun or iron or something, you can solder your wires. That's probably a better way to do it. And the other thing you need is would be helpful if you had something like this, some silicone sealant. It'll make the thing last a little bit longer because if you put sealant on your connectors, then they won't get corroded. It's not utterly necessary. You can probably, if you're just doing a profile of one lake or something, just get along with twisting wires together and wrapping an electrical tape separately. It probably worked just fine. Anyway, so that's all you really need. You clearly could be more elaborate if you wanted, but it's a pretty simple thing. Basically all you're going to do is, because this is a really short line and you need a much longer one, you're going to need to put an extension in between this is a little deal that measures temperature. So if you put it between your fingers like that, you can see the temperature climb eventually, although they're pretty slow response time, which means you're going to have to wait around for a while. I happen to be dead as far as we can tell because there's almost no, well, there's the outdoor temperatures climbing. It's 27.6. Theoretically it should go up to 37 in Celsius or something like that, but not always the case. Okay, so here you go. So we got to cut this thing off someplace and then reconnect this other wire in between there, and that's really all there is to it. So I'm going to shut this thing down before I start clipping wires, and then we can test it against another one of these things later. Okay, so basically we take something like, let's think strategically here. Let's just put it in here someplace. So we're going to cut that there, and then we have to strip off the outside, strip out the outside insulation. And you can do that. Actually, what I've done here is I've got 2 wires here, and they're very, very thin wires. Okay, I want to do the same thing on this side. Oh, a little slow. There. So there I have 2 little wires, and then if we put a little bit more pressure very gently on here, you'll find that you can strip off a little insulation and you get a bare copper wire or bare something wire. Okay, that's done. Stripped and stripped. Alright, so basically you're going to just put this thing between there. Okay, so stripping this stuff is a little bit. Now you're going to want to choose, of course, on each end. Here we got one end. Let's get the other one, because I like Christmas. There you go. And okay, trim off the other wires. Obviously, if you do connect the wrong wires there, it's not going to work very well for you. Try and work. Okay. Whoops. Again. Okay. Then clearly, these guys got to have a little notch in them. I mean, you got to get off some insulation off these guys too. So do that. And you just don't want to put a huge. There are actual wire strippers made for doing this kind of thing, and since these are pretty fine wires, one kind of good way to deal with this is, and since you're going to be putting some load on it later, is you can put these guys together with a little zip tie, and that'll take some of the strain off your connector. I mean, but use your imagination. This isn't exactly rocket science. It's limnology, just tougher. Since we're limnologists, we're very neat. So we need to trim that off. And so basically, now I've got all kinds of wacky wire here, much more than I really need. But you know, you could just, what you need to do is just twist these things together. And I don't think it matters which one you do to which wire particularly. Just, and then what you don't want is for these wires to touch together. That's what you use the electrical tape for, is you use that to keep them from touching each other. That's why I solder. Works a lot better. But I'm going to put a little tape on there just temporarily. Make sure that. So now our basic job, once we've got this wire inserted in here, is to make a couple of solder joints if you want it to be really secure, and then cover those over with silicone, or you can just sort of take your chances with it and just keep them firmly wrapped together and seal that in silicone cement. I have this soldering, a little soldering iron here heating up. It usually doesn't take very long to heat up. And just sort of coat twisted edges with solder like this, and let them cool. And then you can re-insulate that. And then repeat the other on the other end so that it's nice and secure too. So kind of a good next move in this would be to insulate these connections with some kind of silicone sealant. It's waterproof, and it's a very good insulator. So you'll probably make a mess like I am, and you know, let those obviously harden. And the other thing to do would be to put some of the sealant around this connection, as they're really not made to go to fairly high pressure. And that will probably help it work for longer. So there are a few steps left, actually 3. One is you need some weight to hold this thing down after you've got these joints properly sealed with silicone sealant or something and let it dry. What you're going to need to do is find some weight. I found this in this big old weight, and you can just sort of tie this around it. Now you got to recall that these things can hold moderate local temperature, right? So you know, you want it to be sticking out some distance from the, you know, from the thing, and you can from the weight that you find, and so you can find any kind of magical, ingenious way of ensuring all this stuff. I think electrical tape or duct tape or something, especially if it's the outdoor kind, will work pretty well. Yeah, so that's that. We've got a weight on there, we've got the thing sealed, and then you need to calibrate it somehow. So a really simple way to calibrate it is to get a tape measure and stretch the line up and then make a mark every foot or every meter or every half meter, whatever you like. Make sure that you use some kind of permanent marker. So we got that one done. I'm doing this one in feet because I happen to be making this in the United States. So another foot, put a mark there. And you can, then as you're lowering this down through the water, then you can take a reading every, at whatever interval you want. But you got to count the little marks so that you know how deep you are. And then you take a reading at all those depths, and then you know something about stratification.